Hey everybody, welcome back to Woodland Road Funfair. In this video I'll talk about coaster design, lining things up and stacking on a perfect 4-meter grid, building in rooms, speed and altitude, EFN tuning, and timing and configuration. In the design notes I made before I started building the coaster, I was thinking through the design in a room-based fashion. So there would be a pilot academy, which would be the station and the queue. That would go into a warp to a space scene with asteroid dodging, a bit of space combat, a ground bombing run against perhaps an alien homeworld, and then the run home. I built the queue and station off camera just to get the positioning and orientation correct that I wanted. And then the first technique that I used to get my stack design and layouts working properly is I put down a base building so I can figure the 4x4 meter grid visually without having to try and do it sort of by dead reckoning on the ground. And then I like to build the last part first, the return into the station, the final run, the brake run. Make sure I've got enough room for enough cars to manipulate the number of cars on the ride, so that I've always got cars in play, and I've always got one car just about to enter the station at the end of the ride. As the previous car leaves, there's a car ready to go straight in to maximize throughput. Now this stacked approach that I use, I build the whole ride base layout in 4-meter sections. So everything in the far distant part of the shot at the moment that you're seeing on the video is exactly on the 4-meter grid. And then I just put the little joining pieces that are of odd sizes near the station away from where I'm going to stack the ride. And then if I build everything on that grid first and then pull it up to the height that I want, it will be exactly lined up and exactly above the 4-meter base. So you can see there I've done a loop, and then I grab a piece of the loop and pull that up to the top of the lift hill. So when the lift hill descends, or when the cars descend from the lift hill onto the first level of the ride, that piece of track will be positioned precisely above the track at ground level. And then I can position 1 or 2 or 3 mid-level tracks exactly one above the other. Now this is useful because when you're building a ride like this where there's scaffolding, you want the tracks to line up when they run through the scaffolding elements. If you try and do that freestyle, it's all over the place and it's very hard to get it to line up later, and it just doesn't look tidy. Now of course you don't have to follow the grids precisely, you can vary from that, but anytime you want to come back to grid and line up with your scaffolding elements, then you can do so. So as I start each room of the ride, I will extend from the gridded pieces that are precisely where I do want them, and then I'll just sort of free format within that ride room and then come back to a piece that is lined up, and then I can proceed from there and make sure that everything's lined up correctly. So the first part of the ride, we just come out of the station. We're going to have a warp drive active sort of a thing where the spaceship takes off, and then when it comes out of warp, it's going to encounter asteroids. So there's going to be this dodging asteroid run, diving back and forward between the asteroids. I'll put some dips and curves in there to heighten the excitement. And later on, when the ride is being decorated, that's where the asteroids will go. You can see on the video I'm positioning the start of room 2's section pieces using that 4-meter grid logic, and then I delete the piece in the middle and just hook up room 1, so that the start of room 1 is hooked into the 4-meter grid and the end of room 1 is hooked into the 4-meter grid, and then I can proceed with the room 2 layout on the 4-meter grid and see how, as I get to the end of room 2, it's lined up precisely with the start of room 1. So I've got 2 rooms there and I'm still perfectly aligned, so that when I drop the levels, which I'm going to do in the video now, I think, here we go, drop the level down and the levels are stacked exactly. Now obviously the height of these things, there's 2 considerations. One is I want to have the scaffolding on the 4-meter vertical grid that Planet Coaster uses, but at the same time I've got to maintain speed. So I have to mess around with the heights a wee bit to figure out how much speed I'm losing as I go through my room tracks, and I can test that before I put all of the complexity into the rooms. I can just test that with a flat run, and if what I'm after is that wherever I'm going to put a brake section, I've still got a reasonable amount of velocity. This is a spinning ride, so 20 miles an hour is not too bad for coming to the end of a brake section, and then I can elevate that brake section slightly. There's another trick I'm using here, which is making a long straight edge and then aligning the track slope to the straight edge so that the cars maintain speed as they go through these twisty turns, and it looks visually smooth in the sense that each zigzag is dropping by exactly the same distance. Now in this case, as I approached the point where I thought I might be putting a section brake, I was only at 10 miles an hour, not enough. So I dropped it 4 meter level. So this is the trade-off between having the levels at increments of 4 meters and yet still maintaining enough velocity to get your brake sections working properly. If the ride has to stop for some reason and a car stops at a section brake, when it starts up again, it may not be going anywhere near as fast as it was approaching the section brake. So you might be coming in at 25 miles an hour, but you'll be exiting at 8. And if you don't get that right, of course, if you do have a stoppage, then the cars are going to stack back, and then they won't actually make it to the end of the run, to the end of the track. So I like to make sure they're coming into the section brakes reasonably quick, and then I elevate to decelerate the cars and then stop the car but only lose a couple of miles per hour by doing that. And then we're going to make sure that we don't get stoppages unless we want them along the track. So getting the timing right so that the cars complete the second section before the next car completes the first section, so that the next car doesn't get stopped, it can just keep running. So part of the development of the positioning of the rooms has to include thinking about where the section brake is going to go. So another trick here, I had in mind that there will be like an asteroid belt or something in the scenery that I'll add later, and I didn't want to build all that now because it would get in the way of me building the ride. So I just put these art shapes across roughly where the asteroid belt will go, and that enabled me to line up the dips that you see there exactly on those shapes. And so the asteroid dodging section has it's going to be like dip under the belt, and then you come up and oops, there's an asteroid in front of you, so you've got to curve around away from that, and then you're confronted by the belt again, so you dive under that, and then there's another rock in front of you and you scoot away from that. So that's sort of recurring theme as we go through the asteroid dodging section, just to create that feeling of dodging through a belt of asteroids. Now when I did that, if the velocity is anything like useful, then the Nausea shot through the roof. Those tight flat bends are not good for Nausea, and when you put one after another, the Nausea builds up. So the solution in the end was to just experiment with banking the corner, which is quite good on the spinny rides anyway, because it sort of flicks the car a little bit and gets it to spin, and trade off the banked corner against the violence of the dip. So I'm smoothing out the dips and making them less violent, and I'm smoothing out the corner G-forces by banking them. And this EFN tuning is pretty typical. The excitement level is a function of sudden vertical movement, usually a little bit the side to side, but that's worse on the Nausea. So a little bit of vertical movement like dips and bumps, and also speed. And then once you've got enough excitement into the ride, so you want to be well over 5, like 6s and 7s and 8s sort of thing is quite fine. There's a 10.6 on the screen there at the moment. Then you check your fear and nausea, and you often find that the things that add excitement really stuff up the nausea. The nausea ratings go too high. So in this case, I'm dialing back the nausea a lot, and it dials back the excitement only a little. So particularly on a bend, the excitement will hold, but if you get rid of the G-forces, then the nausea drops suddenly. So as I go from ride section to ride section, I'm trying to sustain a green E and a green F and the green N step by step. So as I'm building the ride, the EFNs are holding all the way through the ride. So then when I get to the end of the ride, it's fairly easy to do the final tuning. Now you'll notice about halfway through the ride, pretty good ratings, quite close to the ones I'm going to get at the end. And then they take a dive as I actually hook the whole track up. And that's because the brake run is often slower, and it has stops in it, and so you have to do a bit of experimenting at the end to get rid of that effect of the very last piece of your track wrecking your excitement, and then that drags all the values down. So basically get your green E using speeds and bumps. You can see it gets greener as it gets smoother. That's the nausea, sorry. The nausea is getting greener as I smooth out the G-forces. So I'm using the G-force heat map and the nausea and excitement heat maps mainly. The fear, if you've got the excitement right and you keep the fear in the right region right at the beginning, you're pretty much good to go. You can just work on excitement and nausea, and the fear will sort itself out. So the first, that's the asteroid room pretty much done. And then I got the transition into the ship-to-ship combat. So my idea here is that there'll be an enemy ship parked on top of the station, and the train cars will come out of the asteroid belt and dive down and oh, watch out, the enemy ship's there. So they'll dive, turn away and run away, and then turn and come back and attack the enemy ship. So a bit of pew pew, we'll get some lasers going or something there. And then when they realise they're outgunned, they turn away and go up a second lift hill. So that's the plan at this point of the ride. And I'm messing around here just getting as much EFN action as I can. You can notice how as I smooth out this run, the excitement's dropping a little, like the 10's going to 9's going to 8, but the nausea is dropping a lot. So the nausea is dropping from whatever it was, 6 or something down to 5, 3, 2. Get all that balanced up, and then we can proceed with the next section of the ride. So where are we up to? We've got our launch bay, the asteroid belt, enemy sighted. We've got our swoops and swirls and dips to get away, and we're now building the attack run. So we're going to, we sort of done half of this yellow loop, and we're going to go back and do the second half of the yellow loop, which is going to be the shooting at the enemy. And then that will trend into the lift hill, which is warping away to the enemy homeworld, where we're going to do a bombing run. So what I'm doing now, I check the timing and the speed. What I've got to decide is where to put the section brake that comes after the lift hill. So you've got to remember that's got to be slightly shorter than the time it takes to get to the top of the lift hill. So I can manipulate the lift hill speed. Do we use 6 mile an hour, 7 mile an hour, 8 mile an hour, whatever, and then manipulate the location of that next section brake. So in the end, that's where I decided to put it, between the asteroids and the sighting of the enemy. So I lift that piece of track up to bleed off the last bit of speed, so it might drop it. I can't quite see what the figure, 23 miles an hour there. So get it to jump up, so we drop that back to say 12 or something a bit closer to stopped, and then the brake activates if it needs to and stops the car, and then shoot it off the brakes at about 8. So I only lose a few mile an hour using this method. It also helps to deal with the fact that in order to position the brake there, you're going to lose speed, which drops the excitement, but you've just had this bounce up onto the brake section, which adds excitement. So they don't exactly balance each other out. You do see the excitement's dropped to about 3 there, but straight away dive back down off the brakes, and the excitement's back up at 5 again. And then I'm just doing a bit more EFN smoothing here to finish off that piece. And now, as I said, we're going back to do the attack run. So in this case, I'm going to have some dips and swells, but first I lay out the whole thing on a 4-meter grid again, like before. Make sure it lines up exactly so I've got my reference for the next room after I finish this, and then drag that piece of track up to where I want it, cut out the interconnecting bit again, and leave that as my reference for the next room. And then that straight run that I was just on there, that's going to be where the second lift hill goes. So I'll cut that out and add the lift hill later. And this is where I'm manipulating the level so I've got enough velocity for the whole room to keep the excitement level up. So I think at this point I'm about to, what am I doing? I'm leveling the track out, and I'm going to cut that piece out and build the lift. Here we go. Cut that whole section out and replace it with a lift hill. So of course the section at the top of the lift hill is, when I join into that, I'll be back on my 4-meter grid. So here goes the lift hill up. Now the lift hills are stacked one under the other. So there was a little bit of a chicane there, or S-bend, whatever you call it, to get from the previous section in under the other lift hill, then up the lift hill, and then I'm plugging it in now to join back up to my 4-meter sections again. So that's the attack run section, and then oh dear, the enemy ship's too strong, so we're going to warp away. That's the lift hill, and then we're going to go into to the diving on the enemy homeworld. So to go back again and fix up this attack run, first thing is get the speed rate. So I drop the track, so that gets the excitement level up to like 10s, and then put bumps in it so that sustains it as it's decelerating. So you can see a technique I use here is to make these rather square-shaped bumps first, just by dragging pieces of track up or down, and then use the smooth all to position it into a much more curvy shape. And you can drag it down, smooth it again, drag it down, smooth it again, and it just gets smoother and smoother as you do that. And the G-forces all come right, and the excitement stays high, but the nausea drops. So I'm using the same technique down through, this is the attack run on the ship. Again, just make these sort of very squarish track sections, height changes, and then use the smooth tool to turn them into bumps. You get some nice airtime building it that way as well. To smooth out these sections, you pick a piece of track you want to use as a reference, like an anchor. So like that corner originally was an anchor, and then the corner at the other end, and don't include those in the smooth function, and then it holds them in position and only smooths in between them. So that will sustain your bank angle. Doing the same thing here, except now I've banked it. So I don't include the sharpest portion of the bank in the smooth. I bring the track selection around so that it goes from the peak of that corner back to another reference point on the track, and then smooth between those, and then I don't end up with the track becoming oddly shaped, and then it's very difficult to get it back onto the grid. Pretty much just have to delete it and relay it if that happens. So in each case I do that, bank the center of the corner, and then use the smooth from the center of the corner back and on each side. And then just at the end of all of that, I'll do a smooth across the whole corner. So that just takes the roughness out of the entire section. You don't want to do lots of smooth when you do that. When you're doing from a center of a banked piece across to the previous straight bit, you can just hit the smooth button 10 or 15 times really quickly, and it'll be fine. And then when you're smoothing the part the full curve that's banked, you can only really do the smooth a couple of times, or it'll wreck your banking, because it always brings it back towards level, or brings it back towards the banking of the inbound and outbound tracks, which normally are level. So that's the ship combat room pretty much done. I think I'm just cleaning up the EFN values as I come out of the ship-to-ship combat. Remember, the ship is going to be positioned on top of the station. And now I wanted to see what the overall EFNs look like. So I just did an autocomplete from where I was at down to the final run, which in this shot is the final run is in red and the stuff that I've done is in green. So I just connect those two together and let the track run out, and it's 6.1, 4.8 and 2.4. So 6.1, 4.8 and 2.4. Pretty happy with those. Obviously they're all in the green. If I can sustain that for the last room or two, then we're going to have a pretty good ride with lots of length, and it's got airtime in it, and it's got lots of spins and curls and swoops, and I've sustained EFN all the way through. So once again, playing with the timing, looking at from the previous section break, how far can the car get before the next car gets to the previous break, and then I go back from there a short way and add a section break. Now in this case, they certainly don't make it to the top of the lift hill, so I've had to add a section break just before the lift hill, and then I adjusted the speed of the lift hill, the second lift hill, so that it was again just getting the car to the top and clear before the previous before the next car reaches the previous break. So we're on the final section now. The penultimate section where we are doing a ground attack, the final section being the warp home. So this dotted orange section where I'm going to sweep down, sort of reconnoitre the buildings, come back up again, and then dive down and, I don't know, weave through the streets or something, and pew pew at the buildings. And I'm not sure really what the final run's going to look like, but I'll just dress it up to be a warp home, I think. So we've done a loop down, back up, then I'm going to dive down to floor level and weave between buildings, and up and over and back again, weaving through the buildings. Probably be a final break run, final block break there, and then there's just the run home. So what other techniques have I used in here to get this thing to work right? So we talked about the EFN tuning, we've talked about ride stacking, track stacking, we talked about speed and altitude, timing and configuration, we talked a little bit about section breaks and how to get the timing working. The block sections, I always, the block breaks that provide breaks between the sections, I always add sort of too many of those, as it were, in the final run to make sure I got enough cars on the track, and I don't have any gaps in my throughput. Right at the end, when I tie it all together, I might delete some of those because I never know. I always put too many in, and I know I'm not going to need them all, but I'm not sure how many I'm going to need. So right at the end, I'm going to tune that and figure out just how many cars I can get on the track. So what I've done here, I think, yes, I've finished the bombing run, and I'm putting in the final brake section at an appropriate place there, and then it's the warp home. The track is now all joined up, so if I leave the cars running now, I'm starting to get figures on the final EFN of the run, and I'll come up to a section where I tune the whole thing in a moment. With these block breaks, make sure there's too many, and then however many I need, such that, let's say the first section of the lift hill is say 25 seconds, the next section might be 23 seconds to give the car time to clear so the lift hill car doesn't stop, and then it's 21 seconds, and then maybe 18 or 19 seconds, and I'm also positioning those between elements, so I might lose 1 or 2 or 3 seconds per section, and so the final section ends up being only 10 or 15 seconds long to make sure that it clears before the run of brakes just before the station. So these block breaks are getting closer and closer together time-wise as we get towards the end of the track. Now if you did want to put a stop there, like you had something to look at, or a monster or something that you wanted to stop, of course if you just make that section slightly longer, the following section will not complete as quickly, and you can create 3 or 4 or 5 second stoppages in your ride so that your guests can look at things, look at the scenery. Alright, so we're nearly there. I'm just cleaning up the speed, excitement, fear, nausea relationships on this final run. This is sort of the warp home. Obviously the other two warps are lift hills. We're not going to do a lift hill here. I'm just going to do straight runs home and put a few dips and weaves into them to keep the excitement up. As the speed drops, you've got to use more violent track elements to keep the excitement up. So you can see here I've just trading off speed and bumps. So adding bumps, which increases the excitement, but also the nausea, which means I had to clean out the curve, get rid of the G-forces, get the nausea down again. And doing all of that, I burned off too much speed and the car stopped there. You can see the car has got stuck in a between two bumps. So I tried smoothing that out a bit. Didn't really like the velocity at the end there. That's very hard to keep your excitement high to the end of the track if you've got the cars slowing down to such slow speeds. I mean, these things aren't going fast anyway because it's a spinning coaster, but still I've got to keep the speed up. So I went back and cut a chunk out of the track around about there somewhere. I'm not sure when I did that, but now or very soon. Shortened it by quite a bit, probably about 40 odd meters, and that made the necessary change to get the speed up on that final run, and then manipulated and smoothed out the curves. Yes, that last block break was slowing the cars from I think 20 down to 8, and so I pulled it up a little higher, and that was a bit of a mess because with the 4 meter increments, I think if I went, it only just made it to the block breaks, and I was concerned that if the cars were all stacked and stopped, that the speed losses at the preceding breaks would cause the cars to not actually make it to that break. So I spent a bit of time messing around with that timing and positioning to get it all to work, which eventually it did. And then that last block break was therefore higher, which gave me more speed coming into this section. Plus I chopped about 40 meters out of this piece of track just here, which gave me even more speed. So at this point, there's a lot of green on my EFNs now. You can see it's pretty stable all the way through the ride. Adding more as the track slows down, I'm putting these bumps in. You can see how that increased the excitement from 3 to 7 when I put that wee bump there, and then just adding more and more bumps in this final run. So all the way back, it's bounce, bounce, bounce. Gets you a little bit of air time. Probably not much, and then connect it all in and do the final run. So if you see there, it was 4, 4, 3 something and 1, and as I tweaked the bumps and the G-forces, it's rising from a 4, 6 with a 3, 3 fear and a 0.9 nausea. And what did I find? The brake run is fully loaded. So as I said before, now it's time to delete cars. So pull the cars back to 8 and try that. That helped a little bit. What have we got? Excitement's dropping to 6 and then to 1.7. So drop the cars back to 7, and that pulled the excitement up another whole point. So I'm on 5.7 now. Fear and nausea are fine, and I think I dropped the cars one more to 6. 6 cars. So excitement 6.0, 4.414, and with that last car gone, we hit the 6.2. So all in the green, all good, all connected up. And in fact, when you let the fully stacked, like as in the cars have been running continuously, that even jumps a little more because they are racing through the block breaks a little quicker. Alright, well that's it for this video. In series 2, I'm going to make another 40-hour project with 7 7-minute episodes like I did before. I'm going to detail up this coaster. As you can see, I'm pretty pleased with how that turned out. It felt like a kiddie ride with billboards on the scaffolding, not the official billboards, just panels, decorated panels. Well, thanks for watching, and I'll see you again in series 2. Bye for now.